I'm Pat Cook, KB0OXD. And I would like to talk to you guys about something that's been on my mind lately. That is the nets on multiple voice over IP systems. Now, some of you may already know I am a net control station on, or at least I have experience as being a net control station, running a net that does, on an everyday basis, broadcast on an everyday, that does run its net on EchoLink and IRLP. I'm not going to say which one, but you get the idea. Now, back when this idea started, it seemed pretty cool. EchoLink and IRLP together for a net. Okay, no problem. But then, now, when I look back on it, nowadays, I think we have to take time to revisit this issue. Let me tell you why. Now, when EchoLink started out, we had very few users. Now there are about as many users as there are on IRLP, maybe even twice as many. So you add that in, so you have 3 times as many users on the internet. And so, let me put this to where it makes sense. This particular net, I'm not going to name that particular net, has an EchoLink conference server, which has an IRLP reflector hooked up to it, linked to it, so that people who are on IRLP can check into the net. There's also the flagship repeater where the net typically originates from, to get the users of that system, of that group of repeaters. So you combine the three together, and it just adds up to chaos. Now, first the group started splitting them up in thirds. Seconds, and then starting out with the local repeaters, then EchoLink, and then IRLP. But now I have to begin to wonder if a more prudent idea, and this is not only holds true with this particular net, but for any group, of instead of having one net where everybody checks in at once, why not have multiple nets, multiple instances of that net? This way, okay, let me put it in even further context. I think it's reasonably safe to say EchoLink and IRLP are like two different HF bands. Let's say, for example, for the sake of this discussion, EchoLink is 20 meters. IRLP is 40 meters. Now, anybody who's ever run an HF net or a manager of an HF, who's ever managed an HF net, can tell you there's no way that they would have their net on 20 meters and 40 meters at the same time. Where net control, let's say, for example, talks on 20 meters, receives on 40 meters, while everybody else does the exact opposite. Because then you're not only tying up two different frequencies on but you're tying up two different frequencies on two different bands when it's not necessary. I think IRLP and EchoLink should be treated the same way as HF. At least when it comes to nets. Instead of having one net where everybody, EchoLink, IRLP, and the flagship repeaters, repeaters, whichever the case is, all check in at once, all at one time. No matter how it's divvied, how the check-ins are divvied up, have separate nets, both of which can include the flagship repeaters. Or short of that, anybody who can run the net. Anybody on let's say, for example, the EchoLink. Suppose the repeaters are not around. Well, guess what? The net still has to be run. So why not somebody, so for the EchoLink net, somebody with, in the case of a scripted net, somebody with a net script who's on EchoLink, run the net. And it can be on another link, on another repeater. That's not, you might say, the flagship repeater system or flagship repeater of where the net typically originates from. But you get the idea. It is where net control is located. Even though it may not be the usual place where net control usually comes from. This may sound kind of confusing, but if you follow me, you'll see what I mean. But for simplicity's sake, now, if there is the flagship repeater system, or however many repeaters there are on, well, then obviously they can run the net. Or delegate that to somebody else and they can participate and check in. You can hold the EchoLink net at one time, and then later on in the day, hold a net on have a net on IRLP, or the other way around, or however it is that you want to do it. Because heaven knows there's enough hours in the day to run two different nets. There should not be need to have one net run who knows how many times, where everybody checks in, is asked to check in all at once, and there's no room for, and they just keep going and going and going until, well, anyway. Because let me tell you what happens. What really happens. Okay. When you have a net that is run, where you have EchoLink IRLP and a repeat and the home link, home repeater, whatever, all tied in together, and you divvy up the check-ins according to the way that you're connected to the net. Even if you do that, with the very nature of ham radio operators as in general, ham radio operators in particular are on the RF side. They can't see what's in front of them. They can't see what's on EchoLink unless they're sitting in front of a computer and they're running a simplex link and happen to be looking at the EchoLink interface. They're away from home. They're solely on the RF side. They're not looking at anything but whatever's in front of them. IRLP, you don't have that option. You only have one option, RF, which means a radio or nothing. Now, the very nature of ham radio operators, when we check into any net, and I say we, I mean because myself included, when we check into any net, we're always quick on the key. Because we want to get in. We want to get in before very long. Before a very, very long time. We want to get in. We want to get checked in. Problem with that is we're not the only ones. There's other stations on EchoLink. Let's say, for example, there's been a call put out for check-ins on EchoLink. There's other stations on EchoLink trying to get in, as well as other stations elsewhere on IRLP, some of whom probably don't even know there's a net going on. They just turn on the radio, and this holds true with EchoLink too. You always have these people who turn on their radio and just start keying up, putting a call out to whatever, thinking that everything is all clear, because they don't hear anything, because they get the volume turned down. And so they can use the repeater system, or link, or whatever. Same thing holds true with EchoLink users. You get the volume turned down in your speaker, or the speaker's turned off. And let's face it, PC users, this happens with PCs as well. You shut the speakers off for whatever reason, like say for a phone call, you totally forget that you did that. You key up, and you just connect to a server, thinking, and wait a few minutes, think that it's free, and then you start putting out your call. for whatever, to do something, to make a call with another station or whatever. I prefer to call these man-made gremlins. Now, then there are the electronic gremlins. Basically, intermod, where you have something breaking the squelch of a repeater, and well, you get the idea. Intermod, basically. Electronic gremlin. You add all these things together with a net that is already overloaded because you got two different, because you got too many systems tied in together. EchoLink IRLP and the home repeater system all tied in together. If everything is running well, it makes, but is very busy, it makes for a very long net. If everything isn't running well, it can make for a very chaotic mess, where you got not only the check-ins to deal with, but you get the gremlins, both the man-made and the electronic kind. These things add up. And I just seemingly think that by separating EchoLink and IRLP for the purposes of a net will greatly reduce the amount of traffic in which a net control station has to deal with. When I say the amount of traffic, I mean not only legitimate net traffic, but also any other traffic that is generated through other means, aka the gremlins. The traffic we just simply have to deal with. Because there's not much you can do about somebody who doesn't have their mic, who doesn't have their speaker turned up or turned on in the case of a computer, or somebody who doesn't have his doesn't have the volume turned up on his radio to hear anything. Not much you can do about that. But at least by separating EchoLink and IRLP for the purposes of the net, and solely for the purposes of a net, you reduce the number of problems you have. The number of problems, the number of things that can come up and interfere with that process, with the process of running a net. Now, normal day-to-day operations, when there's no net, no problem. Usually, no problem. The round table QSO, no problem. You're only dealing, because, I say this because typically you're only dealing with a handful of hams. Like maybe, 10 ham, 10 stations, 10 guys, 10 people. But when you're dealing with 100 or so people, but it's a whole different beast altogether when you're dealing with 100 or so people. It's a completely different beast altogether. And I think we need to do something about, and I think we need to do something I think to cut down on the chaos that can ensue when a net is not going smoothly, when there are gremlins to deal with, when there are people who are quick on the trigger. Reducing the number of stations greatly reduces the number of stations. What I say, separating EchoLink and IRLP will greatly reduce the number of people who are quick on the trigger. And net control is more apt to get everybody in before people complain. I've been trying to check in now some 8, 9 times and haven't been able to get through. Because let's face it, I've had to try 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times to get through, to check in, just to check in. It gets irritating after a while. It gets irritating. And then you got rechecks and also people and the people who just simply, check in out of order. Like say an station on IRLP checking in when net control is putting in a call for check-ins on the local repeater. Or EchoLink. Why? Because they don't know what's going on. They don't know what net that's taking place. And they just automatically ask me that it's perfectly A-okay to throw in their call, regardless of order. And largely because they don't even know what net they're checking into. Half the people who do that don't even know what net they're checking into. They just throw their call out there. Talk about one for the log. Well, talk about checking in for the count. Well, how about, to that I say, well, how about checking in when you're supposed to check in? If you're a station on hearing the net via IRLP, well then wait until a call is put out for check-ins on the IRLP side. If you're a station that's on EchoLink, wait for that call for EchoLink check-ins. If you're a station on the flagship repeater, then wait for that. They call for check-ins on the local repeater or repeater system, whichever the case may be. Don't go just putting your call out there unless you need to break in. Either to contact somebody and move them off, or for an emergency. As one ham used to put it, and I credit Jerry Cassidy, N0NYY, N0 November 0, Mike Yankee Yankee, for preaching this. Listen, listen, listen. Before checking in on a net or jumping into a QSO or whatever. Instead of just auto-magically, it's a word I'd love to use, auto-magically SU-me, that it's perfectly A-OK to just throw your call into a conversation, into a net, just any old time. And it not only holds true because, if you're checking in out of order, in some cases it can just simply add to chaos. Fortunately, the nets that I have run, it doesn't really add to the chaos, but it just simply, it's irritating when somebody does that. And beyond that, it's no big deal. We just get your comment, get whatever it is that you have, and then move along. Now we ask for if it's a net that offers comments, a chance for people to comment. Well, then we get your comment and we move on. But seriously, getting back to the idea at hand of moving IRLP, of severing the tie between EchoLink and IRLP for the purpose of nets. I think it's a wonderful idea, particularly for very busy nets. I think it's a wonderful idea. Whose time has come. Much easier to hold a separate net, one for each voice over IP system, than it is to hold one net for everything. HF nets don't operate like that. HF nets don't have, most HF nets I'm aware don't have a 20 meter net and a 40 meter net going on at the same time. And if they do, they typically have two different net control stations, not one. Not just one. They have different net control stations. And HF nets don't split. Don't have net control talking on one frequency, listening in on another, and all the net participants are doing the exact opposite. Let's say, net control talking on 20, receiving on 40, or vice versa, and everybody else doing vice versa. It should never be. It doesn't work on HF. It's not considered good practice on HF, and quite frankly, I don't think it should be considered very good practice here on EchoLink and IRLP. What's your thoughts? What do you think about this? Leave a comment down below. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Should net managers consider severing the ties between EchoLink and IRLP for the purposes of their nets? Or should we just ignore the problem and continue with the way things are? Let's have some fun. Let's have some discussion on this. Let's have some lively discussion on this. I'm always up game for lively debates. You can also leave a video response too. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave a video response. Either way, however it is you respond, feel free to do so. In the meantime, 73, and we'll talk to you later. This is Pat Cook, KB0OXD. Catch you next time.